May 4th. May the 4th be with you and ever be in your favor. Let's talk about things like Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on this episode of the Christian Principles Podcast.
This episode of the Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. And as always, the thoughts and opinions expressed within this episode are those of your hosts and not necessarily of the Herzog Foundation. Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
I'm Mark Zockel. Matt, where are you? What are you doing now? You're not in Salisbury. What are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm just, chillaxing down in Brevard, North Carolina at the Wilds Christian Camping Conference Center on the senior trip.
That's a beautiful place to be. It really
is.
It really is. We won't make jokes about the stairs that are too easy to make jokes about, but we will talk about the beauty of those Blue Ridge Mountains, right? Is that where we are? I'm pretty sure it's the Blue Ridge Mountains there in Brevard. So, but being a little bit out of studio, Matt, I know you're dealing with some background noise, so you're going to do your best to keep that background noise out by making yourself, less than auditory at times when you're not actively trying to speak. But we also then get to talk about a highly technological day, which is, this day has a cult following, as does the movie we'll talk about, and the entire genre, what's the word I'm looking for? The entire cinematic universe, right? I mean, it wasn't, it was cinematic first. No. Yes. It was a book. It was a movie before a book in this case. One of the few. I think that's right.
Yeah, totally. Movie before book in this instance.
Matt, why are we talking about Star Wars and then into these other classics like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Why are we going to consort about that today?
Well, first of all, we're dropping this episode on May the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So, May the 4th be with you, right? I think that's the way you do it.
But that's a tricky thing, though,
hand
right?
up there, and
that's the tricky. That's not.
That's trickies. That's trickies.
Yeah. I'm already not cool enough. Kids would always make fun of me already. No, but we're dropping this on May the 4th, which is, of course, Star Wars Day. There's an interesting undertone, right, in our schools, and we got to figure out where we are. We had the Halloween episode, right? We talked about this. We talked about the things like Halloween that you better get a handle on where if you're a part of a church ministry, your church ministry is on things like this. And even if you're not part of a church ministry, just as speaking for the school and as the face of the school in so many ways, understanding if the population has a tolerance for, and we're picking on Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you may not have those on the same plane. Perhaps for some of you, the C.S. Lewis series is far different than Tolkien and far different than Lucas. Perhaps not, though. Perhaps the witch in the title is enough to move you in one direction or the other. I will go back, though, harken back to yesteryear and speak of a different following now, one that comes from Japan, the Pokemon. Pretty sure that was Japan, right? I'm pretty sure that was Japan, yeah. The pocket monsters. I mean, I was a child when Pokemon came out. I remember that. But I'm talking when I was introduced to them more formally would have been at a church or a school setting, because my family just wasn't engaging on those fronts like that. But I remember a junior church speaker absolutely trying to make a biblical case for us staying away from pocket monsters. And he did the whole, like, what does Pokemon stand for? It stands for pocket monsters. And what are monsters? Are we supposed to think on things that are unlovely? And I'll never forget that. I don't know as though it moved me or if I was just simply for the first time knowledgeable of a discussion in a church setting, or it was a church setting at that point, but I was, my church in school, it was a school within the church. So, the lesson carried over. I'll remember that as one of the first times it was the cultural pushback that was given from a leader in the church that I was supposed to respect. Do you have a thought of a time in your life like that, Matt, at all? Do you remember?
Yeah, not so much a cultural tie in necessarily, but I can remember having a conversation with an authority figure in my life about playing cards, much
Mm.
the same way that playing cards symbolized things are used in mind reading and
Okay, yeah.
fortune telling and all that kind of thing. And then, satanic, demonic influences. And so don't ever, use playing cards. And I can remember my initial reaction to that being, if you hadn't told me that, it would have just been another deck of cards
Have
and it
no
would have
idea.
been another game that, you know, is it possible that I could be influenced by, these hearts and spades and clubs and whatever else? I
Mhm,
mean, sure, maybe possibly, but it became, and even Pokemon, like I never really got into Pokemon, but I remember when it came out, it was a cartoon and
mhm.
that's all it was, to us. It was another cartoon. Granted, absolutely, there are subtle messages, there are agendas that are driven in all of
Everything,
yeah,
everything.
all books, all movies, all cartoons,
All
all of it.
education all
Yeah,
education, right, it's
it everything has its agenda, everything has its subtleties, which we need to be aware of and we need to be careful with.
mhm,
But the the thing, and here's where I feel like this conversation will get to, is these cultural connections are going to be in our schools.
yes.
Like you can have the rules, you can have it's May 4th, nobody's allowed to wear Star Wars paraphernalia, on May 4th. You can have that. That's fine. And I even think there's some institutional value to that, but it's going to be there. These kids are
Mhm.
going to be thinking about it. The teachers are going to be thinking about
Oh,
that
yeah.
and tie it in and be influenced by it. We talked about Halloween. We talked about even Christmas, how it can quickly become something other than what we're actually wanting it to be.
Yeah,
But we need to start the conversation with, this is where the kids are. This is what they're being influenced by. So how can we intelligently
mhm.
come in and both support them, but also keep their minds clearly focused on what is good, what is, as you brought up,
Yeah.
what is pure, what is true, what is lovely, and all those things. Like to keep God the priority in their life needs to be our mission in
Yeah,
everything that we do. So yeah,
absolutely.
that's it. It's going to be there. Just what are we going to do with it?
I great way to start this. If we going back again to our original layout we would have for these episodes, we'd start, okay, well, what is the spiritual impact of this thing that we're discussing? And so, if we're taking, let's pick the most controversial one right now. Let's just run straight to Harry Potter. I say it's the most controversial. The ones I'm bringing up, I would humbly suggest that Lord of the Rings, the C.S. Lewis Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'm gonna say LWW. I gotta say something else because I'm not gonna say the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe every time I talk about that.
Well, the Chronicles of Narnia
Chronicles of
would
Narnia.
be the
There we
better
go.
way of, yeah.
It's
You
almost
just
like I
picked the
have
one book.
it's almost like I have an English degree or something. Yeah, Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, so like Narnia versus Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. It's funny. Lord of the Rings is just 4 words, but it's much easier to say. In Star Wars, I think of Harry Potter as being the one that was much more divisive in my life growing up. And perhaps it wasn't for you, perhaps it was something else. But in my life, Harry Potter was definitely the one that got the most attention and the most like, we will not, we will not, we will not. Okay, that was Harry Potter. And from there, actually, Star Wars would have been the second one in that list of most egregious to least egregious. And Narnia was looked on as completely heavenly. And the Lord of the Rings was something that I was introduced to in my high school years, and my parents really didn't fight Lord of the Rings at all. I didn't hear much commentary from my church or my school at that point on what was considered just to be another, in this way, actually really was seen more of as like as a classic, because it is, but seen as just something else that was out there and available. It was not looked on as negatively. Well, before we keep going, how would you say for those four, what would your ranking have those four been, like as I described it? Egregious to
Yeah,
least egregious.
I'd be very close to putting it the same way. Harry Potter is definitely at the top of the list. I can remember when the books were first coming out,
Mhm.
and my mom was just, we're not reading those. There's
Yeah.
so many other things to read. There's so many better things to read. Um, but I remember she bought a box set of the books, and I was like, "What's going on? You said we're not reading these." and it was because Christmas was coming up, and we would do a name exchange, and she got one of my older cousin's wife,
Mm.
and she said that she was really interested and wanted to read the books, and so my mom got the books for her. But she's like, you know what? She's older; she can deal with it, where you guys aren't going to deal with it.
She was just putting the bottle to her neighbor's lips, as the proverb say. That's all she was doing.
But my mom also was not just anti. She didn't know it. She didn't know what it was, and so that's why she's like, "Yeah, it's wizards and witchcraft. I don't know, if that's what we want to do." But I can also remember when I read The Hobbit first, and then I read The Lord of the Rings much later in high school. But I remember thinking, well, there's wizards in this, so is that not the same thing? And then I actually didn't read the Chronicles of Narnia. This is really embarrassing. Like I had watched the BBC version of the couple of the books, but I'd never read them until I was married, and I sat down. I actually read through all of them in like a week or something.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, this is the one that, as you said, is like the heavenly
it's looked on as
option, and yet it has witchcraft almost more centralized than the others, which is really interesting.
It's exactly how Aslan goes about his business. So absolutely. So we got to refocus, but those would be our list, I suppose. We both identified that Harry Potter and Star Wars would be the ones that would be the top of that list of like, we're gonna wrestle through this somehow. At least in our churches and our ministries.
I should say I didn't even bring up Star Wars, and this is kind of the main one. Star Wars was fully embraced in our home. Like I don't even know how that. Maybe because I wasn't reading it, we were just watching it. But I think it was maybe just so fictionalized that there was never really that connection. Even though I use Star Wars all the time when I'm teaching about Taoism, because it's perfect. The dark versus the light. It's all over it.
Well, and that's why that in my life, that's why it was held up as like, no, we're gonna put that away from us. We're not gonna have that near us. And like you said, for my family, that wasn't the case. For my family, it was, I remember going to the theater and seeing it before my best friend, who was a far larger Star Wars fan than I ever was and ever will be. But I beat him to it to see it in the theater late at night when it first came out. Back when, we did that. Well, I'm not even sure if I was supposed to do that sort of thing back then. I forget, like, if I signed something and said I went to the theater or not. But like back then, when you went to the theater for the the opening, we don't do that anymore. I understand that Star Wars might not so simply fit here as these other ones, but we are talking about how our Christian schools handle these classic, and again, classic, careful with that word, these cultural classics, these cult classics as they are. So that's why we are using it here on May the 4th day. How do our schools go about handling those things? And again, going back to the spiritual impact on our schools, well, we have to be concerned with that, number one. But the point I would want to make to either a first-time administrator or someone who's just considering their handbook and whatnot, I get really edgy. I get really jumpy when I see a franchise title in a handbook and say, like, we don't want anything to do with this thing. And I think to myself, are you going to do that for all the franchises out there? How? Why? What part of the rest of your spiritual emphasis is good enough for everything else, but it's not good enough to cover Star Wars? But again, like you said, whether your school's going to have those stances or not, spiritually speaking, the point I'll make here before we move on to some more practical, not this isn't practical, but to other practical things would be, my handbook needs to stand on its own 2 feet, no matter what the franchise is. I'm not going to respond to a franchise specifically. Most likely, I don't want to say in every case, most likely I'm not going to respond to a franchise in my handbook. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is so important that, when and we've had this conversation, when I'm creating a handbook, I want to focus a lot more on the positive than on the negative.
Sure.
In the sense that I don't want to start saying in my dress code, you can't wear this, you can't wear this, you can't wear this, you can't wear this, because inevitably I'm going to leave something out.
Yeah.
And then next year I'm going to have to add more things because we're just constantly. Yeah. So Rather, I'm going to take the approach of when it comes to, interacting with cultural classics as we're deeming these, there is an appropriate and an inappropriate way of dealing with them. But I don't ever want to make like a hard, fast wall that don't ever bring up Star Wars because there can be very much an opportunity to learn and to grow by using these commonality, these things that these kids are aware of that they know about, and yet we can, use it as a teaching opportunity instead of just, hey, there's no Harry Potter talk in this school. Leave that out the door. And
Yeah.
and what have you just done to that opportunity? So yeah, I would much rather lean on the positive side. And we've gone through this may be deeming going into a different topic, I don't know, but one of the issues, not so much even with these cultural classics, but just, books that our kids would bring in and just start reading. Like, I've had to start telling the teachers, hey, guys, pay attention to the books that they're bringing in and they're reading, because if you don't know what the title is, don't just assume it's a good book.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, we need to make sure that we are very much aware of what they are reading. And there are going to be times, and we've had the times where we've said, "Oh, this is definitely engaging in topics and using language and graphic material that our kids don't need to be filling their
Yeah.
minds with." So
Which
we
is that
have gotten to the point of saying, "Yeah, not that book. You can take it home. You can, share it with
Mhm.
your parents or whatever." But, there is going to come a time where, hmm, okay, I can see a problem here, but we're going to talk about that problem, and it's not just going to be, yeah, nope, we don't want that book here.
It's that fine line. It's that fine line of, as you just said, we want to be able to use what we can to have meaningful relationships and conversations with the students. At the same time, we're not going to introduce the I don't know what this book would be, but, the basics of Wiccan. We're not gonna introduce that book to our students. We're not going to engage in that, and that is gonna be a hard stop. Not gonna do it. But again, I'm not gonna put that in my handbook. That's not gonna be an understanding of mine in my handbook, which again, maybe that's a very small number of places that still do that, but, I was aware of them and am aware of them elsewhere. So to the point, missional spiritually, above all, we need to be gospel-minded in this. You brought up this push-pull, this give-take, this at some point, what can I do to engage with students? Though there is going to be a fine line when the Captain Underpants books come in, which I hate those, by the way. I just want nothing to do with those books. When Captain Underpants comes in my classroom, not even the school code, but my classroom, I'm going to say, guys, Dr. Zockel does not want to see Captain Underpants books in his classroom. He will give you a book if you would like to read it, and that is fine, but you will not be reading that one in his classroom. So those conversations with a gospel viewpoint at every turn, you're going to have to weigh those out. And speaking missionally, before your mission is going to be guarded by and upheld by you as the building leader, building leaders, your school board. You better figure out where they are on some of these things. And you may have some major fans of these franchises, of these cult classics in your body that you're not aware of, in that leadership realm that you're not aware of. And they may really have an effect on a situation that you otherwise wouldn't have anticipated. That could very much readily be a board member or an administrator or a principal who you didn't find out in their interview was a huge Harry Potter fan. And when a certain day shows up, or their kid or their influence because they're teaching this part-time class something and shows up, and then boom, they're introducing their love of the franchise. Have you had a conversation with them about, listen, this is where we are traditionally. Is this where we still are? Or are we, is this, again, think of it, those who are involved with the church, is this where the pastor is? Because you represent more than yourself, which is probably a good place to take this next. We do represent far more than ourselves, and all of us as leaders should be highly aware of that. Our proclivities are probably the ones that get pushed to the back, not brought to the front in many of these situations.
Yeah, I I would add, so rather than just getting to the what seems to be historically the burning of the books or the
Yeah.
just the
Take them
the
out of the
banning
library,
of
ban them, get rid of them. Yeah.
and rather than adding to the handbook, here is the banned or even the approved list, because again that even going down that road is crazy. I don't want it, but probably a good practice would be building like a resource list of some kind that you could provide to your faculty and staff and just say, hey, when this movie comes up, here's something to just consider. Here's a good conversation to have for kids
Yeah.
that enjoy this genre. Another thing that I would mention is, should a book, a series, a movie, whatever it is that comes up, where we're very much aware, like, oh, there are some really challenging elements
Mhm.
to for me to give my approval
Mhm.
of this. There are some great resources online, I know for books in particular, that give you that if your kids like this book, but we know it's objectionable, we
Mhm.
don't there's elements of it that we just don't want our kids reading. Here is a great substitute that, you know, goes along it's like the same genre, same writing style, but yet there's redeeming qualities to it. Maybe it is a Christian book, that has a direct tie-in with Christian values, or it's just not as it doesn't have the objectionable or as graphic of
Mhm.
material. So I know there's plenty. I know with both movies and books online, I've seen many of them. So I don't know if there's necessarily one
Oh,
that's
yeah.
greater than another, but um, of just saying, here's a really challenging of a book that seems like kids really like. Well, let's encourage them in a different direction as opposed to just saying, nope, not here, not today.
There's also other resources like Plugged In for movies specifically, if you are looking for that once over because you'd rather not watch it, or you don't have time to watch it, whatever it happens to be. If you but you wanna come away understanding what is going on with this certain franchise, again, Plugged In would be a wonderful place to go and to check out what those objectionable elements are throughout the movie. I think there is a value in being able to have something like a chapel setting. You have small focus groups in your school this year with students gathering together by age and having larger conversations, really, significant conversations, though not in a traditional preaching sense, with a leader from the church or the school there, though, approved leader there. And this would be a wonderful opportunity to sit down and say, even something like Taylor Swift. I think of her and fellow, they would say artists, whatever we're going to call these musicians and other performers. They It doesn't take much to sit down and grab the lyrics and put the lyrics in front of the students and say, "Students, can you please dissect these lyrics for me?" Sometimes we don't wanna do that because that'd be the most objectionable thing they read the entire school year. But putting that in front of their faces at an appropriate age and saying, "Okay, let's talk through this." A handbook which says Star Wars will not have any place in this building, well, you've just, to your point, you've taken away that opportunity. And I the Harry Potter one is the one we would need to stick with here, though, from both of what you can hear from both of us, we would say that if Harry Potter is a sticking point, then so should Narnia and so should Lord of the Rings and really anything else that deals with witchcraft and wizardry. So we would start our conversations with someone who wanted to have that conversation there. But nonetheless, have those conversations with those students appropriately, or allow we could allow them to be um, we could allow them to be structured in that way. But as we said before, it should be that the expectations, the positive alignments of our ministries, the biblical principles point us to a a stance on all things objectionable, and therefore hopefully a stance in which we can appropriately, in a mature manner, with, again, age appropriately. I'm not dropping certain content on my kindergartners like the world around me would want to in the school setting when I don't think that they're ready for that. But at an appropriate age, at appropriate time. And yes, I'll even say that there are times when we say, as you said earlier, that's just not going to be with us. Depending on what it is, I would really push back about that being a top level down and more just a communication from a teacher. And you're telling your teachers, "Hey, we're not putting this in writing, but we don't expect to see that there, and we're gonna use the blanket administrative anything else is left up to administrative approval byline in our handbook to just say, "Mr. George doesn't believe this is the best for our," and then we're gonna wear that. We're gonna wear that. Ultimately, we're gonna say, "Yeah, listen, no, I don't want to hear Katy Perry in the hallways, and that's my decision because I don't." And I if you sign up to be with us, I'm trying to guard this school's heart with my heart, with my hands, with everything in me. This is something that before God I do believe appropriate for me to do. That is what it's gonna be. Not gonna make our handbook, is gonna make my personal, I'm gonna swing my
Yeah.
administrative weight in that way.
Yeah, I think there is the what may be abandoned a little bit more today is the value of institutional standard. You do need that because an anything
Mhm.
goes philosophy
No,
is
that doesn't go.
chaotic,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
you cannot make that work. But, as I said earlier at the beginning of the episode, I'm at the Wilds right now on a senior trip, and we just this morning had a chapel about, why do we struggle with sin? And it all boils down to because, we haven't developed our taste for God and knowing that
Mm,
God is really good and God is best. And so we're delusional to think that these other things that the world provides are better when they're not in our reality, but it takes that time to mature and to grow in our understanding of who God is. And so at the end of the day, I want in my school to make God so much more valuable
mm.
and the quality things, the good things that God gives us that it just makes these other things seem so pathetic. And that's really what we ought to be driving at. And impossible mission, maybe, but but that needs to be our starting point always. That I want God to be and what God says is best to be the desirable thing. And that doesn't require me to just simply say, well, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. God's word
Yeah.
takes care of that for me.
Love it. We much like we spoke of earlier, we had the conversation about Halloween. I know this has been somewhat general. Maybe those looking at this title thought we were going to go and give our approval of one or the other of these. Um, we're not gonna necessarily do that. There's no and your stance is gonna be different than ours, even personally, but we're walking away from all these conversations kinda I'm looking back. I really am. I would not I would not suggest that a school writing its handbook would take those sorts of stances on specific franchises. I don't think that is a practical, useful place to be. Yes, I completely agree with what you said about institutional standards. They ought to be there, and we usually don't have a trouble making rules. Like usually we're pretty good about that. So why so let's not make more when it comes to let's not make more when it comes to these things. Let's instead, as you said, focus on what it is that God is, who he is, how he is trying to communicate with us day by day. And if there is a place and time, kind of like topical versus exegetical preaching, I imagine, every so often, there probably is a place for us to have a topical sermon. Every so often, there probably is a place for a topical focus group or a time of a Bible class changes from what it is. And you know what? We're with them 5 days a week. Let's take a time right now to pause where we are, or find a way from where we are in the material to Star Wars or to Harry Potter, and say, because we do it with drinking, we do it with drugs, we do it with the rest. Like let's do it with this too. Let's have them be involved in that conversation using this element. um yeah, let's do that. Incorporate as much as is appropriate to incorporate into the school to let it be. But there are some things though. There are some things that just should never be in schools. Yo-yos should never be in school. I've long been over yo-yos and the damage they cause to heart, mind, body, and soul, and friendships and relationships among students. But there's other things like that too. We should go into what are some of the fun bands that and they may not have been written down, or they may have been written down, but what are some of the fun band things from your school, for your school's history and
Yeah,
whatnot?
yeah. We might have to get into that another time
That's
because
fun though.
that could be a list, I'm
That's a long
sure.
one. All right, so we're not going to tell you right now not to go watch Star Wars, your favorite Star Wars, on this day. In fact, probably will tell you that we probably will see something from Star Wars this day. We're not going to tell you to not go and get all over Matt's mom's case about picking up Star Wars for her cousin-in-law, whatever it happened to be that lady was. But we're going to say, consider these things. Consider where you are, where your school is historically, where you are moving forward, and get ready for everything from Demon Pop. What was that? K-pop Demon Slayer? What's that new one out there?
Yeah, I don't even know.
I'm not putting that on. I actually don't remember what that's called right now. Everything from that to just whatever Pixar and Disney have lined up for us in the years to come, Frozen and the rest of them. Because Let It Go is not the best of all thesis statements for someone's life either.
This episode is brought to you by our partners at the Herzog Foundation, whose mission aligns beautifully with ours to advance and support Christ-centered education. The Herzog Foundation exists to catalyze excellence in Christian schools, helping more children experience academic rigor, biblical truth, and strong moral character, all in a safe and nurturing environment. Whether through teacher training, principal development, or strategic media efforts, the Herzog Foundation is committed to helping you, the Christian school leader, fulfill your calling with excellence. Their vision is bold but clear, a national renaissance in Christian education that impacts culture for generations. At the Christian Principles Podcast, we're proud to stand with the Herzog Foundation in that mission. Learn more at herzogfoundation.com. Together, we're building schools and futures on the rock of Christ. And as always, tell them that the fellas here at the Christian Principles Podcast sent you their way.
Report cards don't have to be boring or rigid. With GradeLink, schools can customize their report cards to match their style, including mastery-based grading, and make them visually appealing. Families can view them online or print them if needed. See how it works at cpp.gradelink.com.
Let's keep going now. We should talk about Luke Davis. Luke Davis is going to receive the Christian Administrator Spotlight today. Luke Davis at Seattle Classical Christian School. He is the headmaster there at Seattle Classical Christian School. And once again, Seattle Classical Christian School is one of the Christian schools who had an educator within it who is a recipient of the Herzog Foundation's Excellent Christian Educator Award. So I'm going to go ahead and pray for you now, Luke. Father in heaven, you are good to us. I thank you for Luke. I thank you for what he is doing as headmaster there at Seattle Classical Christian School. Bless him today in his work. If he has anything coming up on May the 4th in his school that he has to contend with one way or the other, give him grace, give him wisdom, and might he offer grace and wisdom to those he leads. May we all do the same. We love you. Amen. All right, folks, thanks for growing with us today.
We want to thank you for listening. We're honored that you spend this time with us each week. Our heart is to bring you practical conversations and resources that really serve you as a Christian school leader. One of the best ways you can help us spread the word is by leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with other Christian school principals you're connected with. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Join the conversation and share any posts that resonate with you. Every share makes a difference in helping more leaders find encouragement and practical tools. And remember, the podcast is just one way we help. We also love serving schools through speaking and workshops. Our keynotes and sessions are designed to give you actionable strategies you can take back to your team and implement right away. If you'd like more details, just send us an email at info@christianprinciplespodcast.com. We'd love to connect. Until next time, thanks for joining us on the Christian Principles Podcast.